Hey everyone, this is David Hamilton with socialexpression.net, and I am so honored and happy and pleased to have Dr. Amy Johnson, who is a life coach. Not only is she just any life coach, she's a life coach that's been my coach that has hugely impacted me in how I work, how I live, how I use my mind, how I operate out in the world. I just can't say enough good things about Amy Johnson here. And today we're going to be talking about overcoming anxiety the easy way. You probably didn't know there was an easy way. There's only a hard way. Well, be open to the possibility there's an easier way than a harder way. So with that, I want to welcome you, Amy, to our hangout.
Awesome. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, cool. I'm excited to have you here. And you have dealt a lot with not only anxiety, but really, we were talking about just before this, panic, which can be a huge topic for people. And I know I've had friends that have dealt with panic, not something that I've dealt with that I can really remember, but mine's been anxiety, social anxiety, and shyness, but such an interesting issue that, is a really good one to talk about along with the anxiety. Tell us about your journey with panic, anxiety, and kind of what got you here today where you are.
Yeah. I don't know. I spent most of my life, especially the first 25 or so years, just thinking I was just an anxious person. I don't really know what that means. It means something different to everyone, I'm sure. But in my mind, that was just I came from anxious people. I had a lot of stuff happen when I was a young kid, that added to that and made me more anxious. And it really, really looked like that was just the hand I was dealt. And I was going to learn some stuff that would maybe help me kind of navigate it through life. But, it would, and I was told this by therapists as well, but this is just kind of the way it is. It may get a little better. It may, be really good on days and really bad on days. And maybe I can kind of learn to control it or manage it or whatever. But for the most part, that was sort of who I was. So it's interesting, I exhibited all kinds of things that were consistent with that. I had, when I was a kid, I had all these little nervous habits, and I used to, be really afraid. My mom would leave and go out, and I would have all these, fantasies, not negative fantasies about her getting into accidents and just, all of this whole mental world that I had created that was very, very anxious and very worried. And I kind of took that into my adult life, and the panic that I experienced really came in when I was in graduate school after, 24 years of just kind of living with all of that worry and just making up these scenarios that weren't happening, that were horrible. It kind of just came to a head, and I started having panic attacks. And the way it felt at the time, was I don't know what the heck this is. It's not totally surprising because I know that I'm an anxious person. I knew, I know my name, that's just who I was, that's the way it looked. So it wasn't totally surprising, but at the same time, it was something new, it was oh my gosh, and now I can't go to class. And now all of a sudden I feel like I'm going to pass out all the time, and I can't go grocery shopping, and I live alone. And what am I going to do? I'm afraid to get behind the wheel of my car, and so it just really quickly spiraled into something that I left my house, as little as I had. I only left when I absolutely had to for about 2 years. And it was a pretty small life I lived during that time, a pretty scary time, but I did what I could to kind of, manage it the best I thought I could. And it did get a lot better, and things just kind of turned around. And that's been about 10 years now, about 13 or 14 years now. I'm older than I want to be, but so it's been a while, and things really did kind of turn around from there. And that's an interesting thing to look at as well. But that's kind of my experience with it, everything from kind of worrying and just being a worrier to thinking I was an anxious person to being practically homebound with panic attacks.
Yeah. And so hearing that, thanks for sharing that. What I'm really curious about is, I'm curious about two things. I'm curious about hearing one that was really bad when you used to just see that's the way it was, and how life was like for you around that instance. And then two, when was it that you a moment or moments or attacks that you started to see, whoa, this isn't what I think it is. I'm not who I think I am. I'm not the panic attack, the anxiety. I'm not just an anxious, panicky person.
Yeah. Yeah. So when it was really bad, now when I look at it from the way it looks now, I can so clearly see how I so innocently just created everything I was feeling. And of course I couldn't see that at all, completely blind to that in the moment. But now again, 13 years later with a little more insight about some of those things, I can look back and say, wow, I remember when I, went to a party and then came back to my apartment and was alone and my heart was beating kind of fast, probably because I had been drinking too much or something innocent. And I thought I was dying and I was about to call 911 and all of this. And I can so clearly see some of those cases. Like, man, it was just a misunderstanding. I really, really thought that, I just didn't know what to make of what I was going through. So now I can see a lot of that, and a lot of it just makes so much sense. It's like, well, I kind of had to go through what I was going through, given how I saw things and then my interpretations in the moment, and then it's interesting because the second part of your thing that you're curious about, your second question, it took me a long time, probably a good 10, 11 years after all of that, to really see, wow, I'm not an anxious person. So I got over the panic attacks and I started to just live a less anxious life. And to be totally honest with you, I'm not exactly sure how that happened. I think it just speaks to the resilience in us, things just started to change. I got some therapy for sure. That was helpful. I did some things, because this was a while ago. I didn't know a lot of the spiritual kind of principles and things I know now. So I just did what I thought I was supposed to do, and it was kind of helpful. And I did just gradually come out of it. And it wasn't until maybe a few years ago, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, that I really, really started to see it in a different way. Like, wow, like I'm actually not what I thought I was since I was a kid. None of that was ever true. So it's been an interesting kind of evolution. There was a jump where life got a lot better and I experienced a lot less anxiety. And then there's kind of another set of, kind of another level where I saw it in a different way quite a bit later.
Yeah, it's what I love when I hear that is that there's so many different ways and resources and tools, I guess if we want to say, to that we can use to help ourselves. But what I really like that you're pointing to is the resilience that we all have the capacity for, that you really taught me about as well, that mental, psychological resilience especially. And for me, it started to make things a whole lot easier. And there were successions of moments, we're talking about the easier way versus the hard way, which I have my own thoughts on. But I would love to hear from you, what, is there an easier and a harder way, to kind of go about dealing with anxiety, panic, all these kinds of things, which at the core level, I see them as quite similar the more I've gone down this rabbit hole. But just someone in their situation, they're often like, oh, this is so different. This is so and it is so real for them. It absolutely is. But, to where the world is scary and separated, and panic is so different than anxiety, and so different than fear, so different than whatever. What would you say would be the easier versus the harder way to go about it, given what you know now?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I'd love to hear what you think is the easy and the hard way too, because it is it's something we obviously both, we didn't talk about this before, have a feel that there is an easier way and there is a harder way, but exactly what we mean, I don't know, maybe it's something kind of different, but so when I think of that, like when you say the easy and the hard way, I think of the hard way is thinking about all of this stuff. It's a couple things. It's first kind of what you just said, thinking, and I hear this all the time, it's just innocent. I thought it too. Oh, well, I'm just a worrier. This is different. Like what you're talking about doesn't apply to me because I don't have panic attacks. I just worry, or I just get nervous when I'm in social crowds, or I get this or that. And we just innocently sort of picked this up from psychology, I think, that there are all these, what, 400 or 700 plus like distinct kind of diseases that we can have or disorders we can have. So our specific case starts to look very different. And we start to think like, oh, well, no, but I'm different than these people. And, you know, we build up this big case, and it's almost like we're making ourselves in our own heads worse. Not really, but in our heads, we're making it in to be like, well, I have something that no one else has, and this is different. And I think that's one thing, thinking about it like that and looking at the ways where we're special in a bad way, you know, or different or unique or alone in this makes it really, really hard. And a second part of the hard way, I think, is when we look at, well, what do I do? Like, what am I going to do? You know, tell me the steps, like, tell me the things to practice. Like, what do I do when this starts to happen? And it's not that that's not helpful. It's not that there can't be things to do that really are helpful. You know, I mean, and I think that was helpful for me. Like I said, like I went to one of these therapies where I was afraid of fainting. So they spun me around in a desk chair like this until I got super dizzy and made me stand up and said, see, you're not going to faint. Even if you do, you'll live through it. I mean, it was kind of exposure therapy, right? There was a lot to do. It was all about doing stuff to get over it. And it was helpful in some ways. It really honestly was. But I think when we like just think about it so much and we're so focused on the part we see, we're so focused on like, well, this is what I do and what I think and I'm different and what do I do differently and what should I do differently? We're so focused on this physical world of stuff that it starts to feel really, really hard because it's just overwhelming, you know? And the easier way, I think, is looking at just what we understand. And when we come to understand that whether you're a little bit shy at a party or you're at home, you know, thinking you're going to die from a panic attack, the same thing is happening. It's showing up in a somewhat different way, but there's the same basis. That's human life. And whether you're in one of those two camps or you're, you know, on top of the world, like loving life, experience is still coming through you in the same way. And it's the same basic stuff. It's just that it kind of, you know, we are lucky enough to have a huge variety of human experience as a human being. So it shows up in so many different costumes. And I think we look at those costumes, you know, and like kind of freak out at the costume and we make it mean something. But if we can look a little deeper than what's showing up beyond the costume and kind of look at where it's coming from and get more of a sense of that, we start to see we're not alone. It's all the same. And it's not about what I do. You know, there's more to it than that.
There's nothing I can disagree with that you've just said. Why would I? I mean, that's like for me, at least I can talk from my experience of when it became much easier is that precipice almost like of where I really saw it. And I remember the conversation and I said, well, you know, Amy, there's this approach and then there's the inside out approach and next approach. You're like, no, David, this is not an approach. This is how it works. And it was just like I got psychologically body slammed, even though it was very gentle. You know, I mean, you were strong in your resolve and pointing to this, but I just was like, and I felt like Neo in the Matrix, where that scenes where he's like, he sees the whole thing. Psychologically, that's what I felt like. And when I saw that all the approaching, the methodologizing, I'm making up words here for fun, you know, making a way out of it was getting in the way, and that deepening the understanding, as you said, of how it just works this way, and that we fundamentally live in a thought-generated reality experience, and said more simply, we feel what we think, entirely was so shocking to me. And then the sort of all the uphills and challenges that I would, you know, do behavioral things, exposure things, if we want to get, you know, standard psychological about it, use that term, became totally secondary, if even useful at all, because the whole thing was being driven by the thought experience. And then things to do like, well, what's a strategy, or just become a way to help get a result. But there was nothing to overcome. There was nothing to go up against, because it's like fighting ghosts in a sense. It's like, I'm trying to fight this ghost and I can never win against this ghost because the ghost is there, but it doesn't matter if the ghost is there because it's just a ghost. It's just a thought. And that became the easy way for me, is to see how it all comes from that thing. And I'll say something that's really interesting. I saw a link come across the other day of somebody saying how cognitive, and I'm not going to make a comment. This is not me judging cognitive behavioral therapy, but a therapist or a researcher said cognitive behavioral therapy is not as effective as it could or should be, and psychodynamic therapy is. But the reason is because it brings insight, and when we work with insight, that is what opens up things for people in whole new ways, where what seems so real, just like reality, shatters, dissolves, or disappears.
Yeah.
And the principles, 3 principles, point is it's all about insight. Somebody having insight, and this is just how it happens. And so while behavioral stuff is cool, and I work with people on that, especially if they want to build a social life in a certain way and they want to get results, well, yeah, they've got to take action. I'll support them in that. But without this insight, inner peace, understanding, not, well, what do I do? What's the right thought? What do I think? But how do I understand this more and really see it? That to me is the easy way, much easier way.
Yeah, definitely. And there's just a sense of kind of peace. And for me, there was a sense of relief that came with it. Not that okay. So when I kind of first got over the really bad part of my anxiety, I was back in life. I was back able to do things, and I was really, really happy about that. But it always kind of felt like this could happen again at any time, and like, so I went out with my life, and I remember thinking, even years later, 5-7 years later, like, man, I feel great, but I sure hope I don't get that anxiety disorder again. Like it's getting the flu, and it could come back at any point, and I would have been right back where I was. And it wasn't until seeing more of that underlying, like the understanding that we're kind of pointing to, that kind of took it to the next level. And it's still true. Like I could still get lost in thought. I mean, and I think all human beings feel anxious, and we all feel fear, and we all feel shy at times, and all of that stuff. And I still suffer sometimes when I feel that stuff, as I assume most people do, but there's just something about seeing how when we're lost in something like that and we just innocently can't see our way out, it feels like it's right behind you, and I felt like that for a long time. And now it doesn't feel like it's right behind me. Even if I got lost in it, I just know there's so much resilience there, and there's so much capacity in every human being. We just come with this capacity to, it's like we're being pointed toward the truth. And if we just kind of look, and if we just like let our minds settle down a little bit, there's an excellent chance we're going to see some of that, and especially once you've seen a little bit, it's there. Like it doesn't really go any, like you kind of know it exists. So it's almost like, I don't know, I just feel like I'm closer, like we're always close to health. Health is never far away from us at all. But there's a sense of being able to really breathe deeply finally, once you see this, I think.
Yeah, that's how it's been for me. And I love the point you're making, because it's also easy for someone who might really be struggling and watching this or going, what are they talking about? What is that? I don't get it. Like, or it all sounds good on paper. Yeah, I get it, but it's not really going to help. It's not really helping me right now. And it's that we get caught up we're going to get caught, in thinking that, yeah, what's happening out there is really what I'm experiencing, instead of it's going this way instead of that way. It's going, a lot of the terminology is inside out versus outside in. Somebody that's watching this is like, oh, these people get this and I just can't get it, or how's this going to help me? It's like I call it the half-life becomes much shorter of getting affected by things, because we've seen it and you keep seeing it again, that, oh, this whole thing is when I'm upset about getting cut off in traffic, or I'm all of a sudden have all these thoughts about I'm nervous talking to this person, that there's fundamentally no difference, and that it's a made up sort of projected experience, that the grounding in it keeps getting deeper and deeper. The understanding of it becomes something to lean on and rely on.
Yeah.
But it's something that I find it's just there. It's just we know it. And so even to lean on it and rely on it is sort of like, it occurs to me, why don't I even do that? Because it's just how it is. But it is nice to have that. Well, I just know, trust or faith or all these kind of words that it just, and so when we get caught up, and Michael Neal, who's, an awesome coach in this kind of work too, is said, and I finally have started to see, he's like, well, even when you do get stirred up, it's not such a big deal. I've been experiencing that more when I'm really in the thinking and like, I might be anxious. It's just like, oh, that's not a big deal. And then the whole thing just pops.
Yeah. It's funny when you're talking about all the different things, like the different ways that it shows up. And I think it's so normal. Like it's just so natural for us to look at how it's showing up. Like we were saying in the beginning, even, well, no, mine's shyness, so it's different. Well, mine's panic, so it's different. We look at the costume and the end result kind of manifestation of whatever it is. But what you and I are talking about is what comes way before that and kind of makes that possible. But we're so stuck sometimes looking at the end result, which is kind of done and over by the time we look at it. And it's kind of superficial and meaningless anyway, as we start to see, but before you know that, it's like that end result looks so important. But what I was going to say is I recently taught a 4-week class on anxiety, and there were about 25 people in the class. And it was so fascinating to see in the beginning, in the first 2.5 classes, everyone, when we open it up for questions, and everyone was like, well, but mine is personal. This is what mine's about. Mine's about, I'm afraid of, going out in public because I have this medical thing, or mine's because my house got broken into. Mine's about this. And everybody's anxiety looks like it's about something, right? Just like our sadness, our happiness, whatever. It all looks like it's about something. But what started to happen is people just started to, look at these deeper truths as people started talking less about what it was about, because truly our thinking is not about anything. It's almost like such a tough thing for me to try to describe in words, but it feels to me almost like, thought shows up and it's just like this energy that flows through us and gives us an experience of life. And in a split second, we would never recognize this. There's like something, this little machine in our head called our brain, I guess, that like will find some content and kind of like attaches to it, right? So suddenly it looks like all the stuff we're experiencing is about that or about this, and we spin these stories that make it look like this really great, elaborate movie with a storyline and meaning, inherent meaning, and all of that. But when you start to see, well, maybe that isn't, maybe all that stuff isn't really that, it's not about anything. And you just take people deeper. By the end of the 4th class, like it was like the questions were completely different. It was no longer, well, this is my case, or here's my story. I really got to fit this in, and tell you my story. Like people started to see, okay, well, that's just my story of it, but there's something more here to look at.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I love that. Thank you for bringing up or sharing that experience, because I had the same with the client the other day where I'm an evil coach that makes them fill out a reflection and results report. And so they can get it out and really see the insights and see what's going on. And I read the report before, and then we did the coaching and had the conversation. And at the end, I said, well, what do you think about that now? She's like, no, that doesn't even make sense what I wrote. She just, because the state of mind that she was in,
yeah,
all that was a reflection of that state of mind.
Yeah.
And so the question she was asking, and how do I do this, or how do I, be more successful, or, I don't really recall what exactly it was in the report, but it just didn't make any difference anymore. It's like a whole different reality, a whole different way of living.
Yeah. And that's so, to bring up state of mind. I mean, we haven't said it in those terms in this conversation yet, but I think if you really want to just get simple and easy, that's what it comes down to. Like the easiest way, and I don't know, I'm sure there are much easier and more simple ways that we could describe it, but the simplest way that it occurs to me right now to kind of look at this is like when you know you're not at home base, when you know you're feeling anything that's just kind of anxious or whatever it is you're going through, your state of mind is, you're feeling a lot of your own personal stuff, and you just kind of don't want to trust that. And there's so much of that. And people that suffer from any kind of anxiety, we start drawing conclusions and staying home and making different choices and it's like we act on it so much. But if you can see, okay, I'm not really all that trustworthy right now, not in a bad way, but it's like, my state of mind's just a little not the way I want it to be, not totally clear. I'm not all that trustworthy right now. And you wait until you're in a different state of mind, everything looks different. And I think, obviously anxiety is like an extreme example of that if you're really in some acute anxiety, but there's so many levels along the way. And if you just know what to trust and what not to trust, it gets really kind of simple.
So with the state of mind part, being in the space, one of the hardest things I found for me, and I think that can be for people in understanding this more, is that when we get in that state of mind, we want to crawl out of it and do whatever we can to get out of it. And so it seems like the best thing to do would be to figure out how to get out of it, apply a technique, do something. What do I do? What do I do? And that's part of what my client was struggling with, is what I do. I said, well, what if even that question and all is simply a reflection of your state of mind? And it's just an indicator of where your state of mind is at. And there's nothing to do about that necessarily, because what you're doing is sort of running on the hamster wheel by trying to fix it through that. And you might find a solution that works, right? But what I found is that's a temporary fix, that when we get in that place, so what do I do? We scramble, which is perfect for anxiety. It's like, instead of, there's not anything to do. And that there's this, if we let the mind settle, which you've spoken about, which, I've come to understand is an inherent mechanism in everyone's mind, or a capacity to, I don't know if it's to activate that, but it's so fascinating that it's just literally nothing to have to do, and the thing will allow that to take over and it resolves itself. It's still so freaky to me.
I know. And we get tripped up because it's not like it always happens instantly. It's not like it always happens the way we want or when we want, but it does always happen. But it's in there, it's in there. I always think of this quote that I heard from Bill Pettit, which is, it's not really a quote, but basically said that human beings are the only animals that when we're lost, we go faster. Every other animal in nature, if they're lost or they just don't know where they're going, they stop or they slow down and they kind of regain their bearings, and they proceed with caution, or they do something, they wait for some common sense to point them in a direction. And we, like you're saying, what do I do? What do I do? Like, we run through it because we think we just have to do more and go faster. So I love what you said of that question. And especially the feeling behind it. If you're asking it, like, what do I do in that way? That's exactly what it is. It's a reflection of, you have a lot on your mind right now. It looks like you need to find an action instantly. And that should tell us something about, or it can tell us something about our state of mind more than that we actually need to do something.
Yep. I'd be interested in hearing if you have a story of a client that really, that whether they were dealing with panic or not, or anxiety or whatever, but one that comes to mind that they really were dealing with something and they saw something and everything shifted. Maybe it was a few moments, but do you have any story around that might help people that are watching to get a greater sense of how this might work in real life, in real time?
Yeah. The one that comes to mind for me, I love it because it actually isn't one of those amazing, like, she saw something and everything changed, but it's one of those where it's like she's continually seeing something, and it's not even that, I don't know what's big or not big, but to her, she's like, oh, I think there's something to this. And then she's seeing it more and more. So she's just kind of has a lot of just low level anxiety. She's a worrier. She's up all night with all the what ifs in her head. And she said, like, maybe about a month ago, she's like, I was laying there, couldn't sleep while I'm in all my what ifs and stuff. And she's like, I had the thought 5 minutes ago, I was fine. And everything, and she's what ifing again. It looks like the stuff she's thinking about it's about that. So, she's like just bought a new house and has a baby and all the, there's a lot of stuff going on. And it's very compelling that all of this anxiety has something to do with all of that stuff. So there's the whole about story. But then she's kind of realizing, she said, wait a minute, 5 minutes ago, I still bought a new house. I still had a kid. I still had a job to go to in the morning. All of that was still true 5 minutes ago. Why the heck did I feel so different 5 minutes ago? And it's just like, she's just kind of seeing, oh, this is something that just kind of comes through me. And she's seeing that, and we've talked about that every time we've spoken in the last month or whatever, but she sees it in a deeper way each time. She's like, oh, now it's like, and then I thought 5 minutes ago, I was fine 5 minutes ago. So now she's like at a different level with it, but it's really just her deeply seeing something so simple, and that's true for all of us. That our circuit's not like our life circumstances and all these things actually change and then we feel what we feel. I mean, we feel what we feel first, as you said, goes in the opposite direction of how it seems to go. And as people really start to get a glimpse of that, I think it just feels safer. It just feels so much safer because we don't have to avoid a bunch of landmines out in the world anymore. It's not about that. It's about my thinking's all jacked up and I'm going to just lay here and let it settle down.
Yeah, it's amazing the freedom that to me that exists in that simple, seemingly just, little moment, like why, it can be so drastically shifting of somebody's world or their life, something so mundane. And I gotta say, if anybody watching this, please get Amy's book, Being Human. What's the full title? Being Human, Thought Mares and Daymares, and what is it?
I don't even know. Thought Mares, bouncing back in your true nature.
Yeah, it's just an amazing book. And I was in a program with Steve Chandler, who's a wonderful coach that helps coaches and business people create businesses, wealthy businesses, and have more success. And he interviewed you, and he sent us that book, or I got the book, I can't remember. And I just liked how down to earth, straightforward. That's just how I experienced you. And I read this book, and it didn't even talk about 3 principles, but just the way you wrote and the way the stories were just so impacted me. There was like a calmness and stillness that somehow you wrote this book in a way that pointed me into that innate capacity without me even knowing it. And I'm like reading about a mother and her kid, and I'm like a single, almost 40 something guy who likes to hang out with his friend. And I'm like totally impacted by it. I'm like, how is this possible? And then we talked, and I was like, I got to work with you. And so please get that book, because a lot of it gives more practical stories that we don't have time to in this interview to go over. And it's just so beautifully written and so impactful, I think, for so many people, that book and that piece of work. So thank you. Thank you for writing it. Thank you for existing, Amy.
Well, thank you. Thank you for liking me. My ego likes it.
Yeah.
My ego likes that you like the book. It's funny though, because it really is just, I think part of the reason why it was so simple for me to write and why people kind of like it is I don't want to teach anything. And even this is just a conversation. This is just us talking, and there's definitely, as coaches, we're both kind of talking about stuff with clients and how we've kind of described things and all of that. But it isn't like we're saying, it's not like, here's what you do. It's not even like, here's how you think. It's just 2 people having a conversation, and that book is just like me basically having a conversation with myself and putting it on paper. And I think that just is so impactful, because we're so used to being told what to do and being kind of taught things. And I don't know, there's something about that. I've just seen so many people, myself included, just kind of throw away all my common sense and like look to this later. And it's innocent on their part. They're just sharing what they've seen and trying to help other people, but it just gets kind of unhelpful at some point when we do that.
Yeah. And the biggest part of our jobs is to point people within and to point people to, wisdom is the fancy way to say it. Quite frankly, common sense is another way to say it that's really cool. To be internally referenced is a fancier way to say it than externally. Well, what do I do? And I need you as a coach and a teacher, instead of, there's so much within. And sometimes that is helpful. If I work with people, sometimes I do say, hey, here's what you do in a more of a mentoring type of thing, as far as they want to know how I've built certain social circles, if we're talking about the social confidence thing or whatever. But more and more, I do find myself like, even, constantly really pointing them back to what's already within, this capacity to know what to do, to come from a natural clarity and calmness where the solutions just boom, boom, boom. And then things that we've learned, what I'm so shocked is actually, like, if it's business stuff, or marketing, since I have less going on, I go, oh, that's really cool. And I just take it and do it. And it's quite easy. And I don't argue with, well, is that the right way? I've spent so much time arguing with strategies, that people have come up with that actually have been really cool for me if I've used them. Because I think there's this weight of going, well, no, it's just, it's all thoughts, so I don't need any strategies. And we turn that into sort of this way of going around of as if wisdom doesn't show up in many forms, because it does. And it can show up in somebody saying, hey, do this, and do a webinar to promote your business. Oh, okay. But no, I don't need to do webinars. It's like, well, that's making like the opposite out of it, or I don't need to follow that. Sometimes it's like, the advice of, I don't know, smile more. Oh yeah, that is great advice.
Yeah.
But that's only great advice when I'm in a calm state of mind. If I'm in it's like, smile more. Right. Yeah. Why the state of mind thing is so powerful. So what would your advice be to someone that says, this is all great, this sounds great, or what would you say to them? What do I do? Exactly that part. What do I do? What do I do with this, David and Amy? Yeah. What would your advice be, and what should they do to understand this more? Where should they go?
Well, I mean, I think it is, like you said. So if the question is, well, what do I do? What do I do? I don't know what people are going to do. They're going to do what they do. But when they understand, when we just kind of do get kind of quiet and we understand a little bit about where this experience comes from, we do tend to know what to do. And if we don't know what to do, it isn't really a problem. We hang out and wait until something occurs to us to do. Now that sounds so overly simplistic, and again, like you're saying, so many people are going to hear that. And I've heard this so many times. Like, people are like, well, I can't just sit around and do that. Like, I have an actual problem here, so it's not at all saying don't do anything. Like you're saying, like it is, yes, you have to take action in the world at some point. We are human beings in a physical world, and movement and action and doing things is required. It's just that I can't tell you specifically how to think or what behavior to do, because I don't know. I don't know that for you. I only know it for myself when my mind is clear. I don't even know it for myself half the time, but seeing that we have that in us, that when we start to see this, things get easier. And I think when we are in a good state of mind and we're patient, there's just something in that feels true. Like what we're pointing to, and there are all kinds of ways to learn more about it, totally free ways that have nothing to do with hiring anyone as a coach. But, you're aware of them, as am I, like free videos. You can go to YouTube and type in, all kinds of words that we can put somewhere for people to find them, where they can find this information completely for free. So there's all kinds of ways of just being around this understanding, being in conversations about it, hearing other people talk about it like this, where it just, I don't know how it works, but it kind of like seeps in your pores and you kind of start to see it, and I think honestly, like having been through it and you as well, in various forms, like, I think that's the thing to do. That just really occurs to me as the thing to do, is kind of get that understanding, start to like look at where all of this experience is coming from and what it really means. And then from there, you will know the specific things, like things are just going to show up for you.
Yeah. I say you have a piece of advice. That's the hire Amy for somebody.
I'll say hire David Hamilton.
Yeah. Well,
I mean, and both of those are wonderful, obviously, but it's like,
Yeah.
But what are we really doing? We're talking with people.
That's
We're,
right.
when we're working with them, it's like we're just showing them, hopefully trying to describe in words what we've seen, or through a feeling, trying to impart a feeling on someone that gives them a glimpse of what you and I have seen, probably just a tiny little corner of, and and they can get that glimpse in a lot of places, and even just within themselves when they're feeling good.
Yeah.
But I know there is that, obviously, especially when you're feeling anxious and impatient and scared, there is that scramble to like want a step, or want 3 or 5 or 7 steps. And
yeah. And I'll put links below the video for everyone to your site. I'll probably put some links to some 3 Principles resources as well. Because there is a lot of free stuff that can really impact. I've had people I have a testimonial from somebody who said, thanks so much. I'm unsubscribing from your list because all your free stuff helped me so much. I was so proud of that one. So proud that there is so much free. And then if somebody needs more support, that people like you and I and many other people are out there to help see it more, understand it more, accelerate the process. If that's what they want. And if they don't, that's cool too. Like, nobody says you have to do any of this by any means, which is such a freeing thing. I think one thing about doing personal development or overcoming fears or anxieties or panic attacks is, for me, there's this thing, a lot of the stuff where we take ownership and take responsibility. And I've seen that none of that is required or that becomes natural when we understand more that to have to do this thing, like I take responsibility and not play the victim and I'm going to like suck it up, is like, yeah, that can be a way. But I think deeper and beyond that way is like, well, the whole thing is sort of this made up story, victim owner. How does that even exist other than that we say that it exists? And to see that level is the level of the matrix cracking more than, okay, well, I've always got to take responsibility. Because if we look at the truth, there are times where we don't take responsibility. Because we're human beings and we do make mistakes and screw up and miss things and whatever. It's like, you're not being responsible. Well, like you said before, it's innocent when it comes down to it, that innocently word that we only know what we know in a given moment. We can't know what we don't know. We can't get out of our anxiety or panic in the moment that we can, and that we can actually take away responsibility is what I found was like, oh my God, I don't put all this pressure or that it actually like resolves itself. That's been crazy.
Yeah, that's what I totally agree. I think I've seen that be so helpful. One of the most helpful things for people is seeing that it's not personal. I mean, I definitely, like, that was my whole thing. Like, this is just who I am. It has something fundamentally to do with me. And you know what? No, it doesn't. You're experiencing what you're experiencing. We all are. And it really isn't about us, because what is us anyway? Us is just our mind wanting to say, oh, this is mine. That's yours. Like that. It's a bunch of thought, so like that we just all have this rotating, constant moving like flow of human experience, and it doesn't belong to anyone, and it doesn't inherently mean anything about us. Even if you get the same stuff every day, it doesn't mean anything about you. I think, so it's almost like seeing it as impersonal, if that's, kind of getting rid of responsibility or whatever that looks like for people. It's like, I think that's amazing.
Yeah. And I felt a little challenged saying that, because some people really use those kind of distinctions as coaches or mentors or whatever. And so I was going, but it's what I've really seen. It's what's really helped me more than anything. And I even find there's times where I go, yeah, I'm taking ownership and I have choice. And we can get into the free will versus choice discussion, which I love, but not today. Maybe we'll do another one. But kind of the same thing, that this is different and I'm separate, that there's a lot of made up distinctions in there that make that real or not real. Anyways, so I think we'll probably have to finish up here just for time's sake. I know you've got clients to serve and I've got work to do. How can they find out about you? Where should they go? Or just tell us that.
Yeah, my website is dramyjohnson.com. It's just dramyjohnson.com. So there's all kinds of stuff there. You can find me and see videos and articles and all kinds of good stuff there.
Awesome. dramyjohnson.com. Any courses or anything that you have available that you want people to know about in the near future?
I do. I have a few. I mentioned that anxiety course that I taught, and I'm actually going to be that's going to be a product for sale. The recordings from that course, and we've had everything edited and took out all the names, but there's just so much great conversation and so much great content in that I really wanted to be able to share it more widely. So there is going to be that there, and there's always new stuff coming up. I mean, if people want to just kind of join the list there, you'll be made aware of all the new stuff.
Awesome. Cool. And so any final thoughts, any final amazing, glorious words of wisdom from Dr. Amy Johnson? No pressure.
No pressure. Well, I'll give you some words that aren't mine, because then there won't be any pressure. But the whole time we're talking, and like it's my favorite quote. I just think it's one of the most important things that we can ever hear. Is this? I'm horrible with quotes exactly, but something Sydney Banks said along the lines of, if we could just learn to not be afraid of our experience, that alone would change the world. And I think that's so huge in everything we're talking about, but it's particularly in anxiety. And when we're talking about fear of fear, we're talking, and what is fear? Fear is thought. So we're talking about being afraid of our thought, being afraid of our human experiences. And just remembering, all of that stuff does show up. It's not ours. It's not you. It's not meaningful. It's all just life flowing through us. And we do this so innocently, but if we weren't to stop it, and say, I don't like this. I like this one. I don't like this one. I want more of this, less of this. It would just flow, and things just start to work themselves out. And I know that sounds too good to be true, but it actually works that way, So I think so much about, just don't fear your experience. It's all temporary. It's not about you. It's okay. And yeah, that's helped me, and hopefully it helps others.
Thank you for that. So thanks so much for being here, being in this interview. I think so much wisdom. So happy that you do what you do, and you're helping people, and you help me so much. So thank you for that. And, we are complete.
All right. Thank you for having me. Great conversation.
Thanks, Amy. Bye-bye.